Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War. We're on to week 45, Artillery in World War One, the key to success. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you followed me over at Twitch and also join the Discord. Now, the key to success. This, based on the title, I'm guessing not too many things are going to happen this week. Or it's going to be another one of those weeks where things are getting set up, but nothing's truly getting accomplished quite yet. That's gonna be my guess for what's happening. See if I'm proven right. Go ahead and dive right in.
Just over 2 months ago, the Russians had taken the Austro-Hungarian fortress of Przemysl.
God, that was, 2 months ago. About a month ago for us, since I do about 2 of these a week.
And had driven the Austrian Imperial Army down on its last legs. But with German support, the tide has turned, and this week, Przemysl falls again.
Yay? Death? Woohoo?
I'm Indy Nidell. This is the Great War. Last week, Italy joined the war, and hostilities broke out between Italy and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Second Battle of Ypres came to an end on the Western Front, with the stalemate continuing. British battleships were sunk at the Dardanelles, and though the Russians were successful in Persia, eastern Anatolia, and the Baltic, they were taking a real beating in Galicia. That beating continued this week as the Russian retreat from the mighty Austro-German Gorlice-Tarnów offensive was over a month long. They were now east of the River San, near the fortress of Przemysl, a symbol of Austro-Hungarian military might that had fallen to Russia in March. By this time, though, the fall of Przemysl to the Austrians and Germans could no longer be prevented. They had been closing in on 3 sides in late May, and after 5 days of preparing their enormous batteries, the final bombardment began May 30th. Ironically, many of the German and Austrian soldiers were sheltering behind the earthworks that the Russians had built during the siege months ago. There had been no time for the Russians to destroy them during the retreat. So, May 30th. The north sector of the Outer Rings fell that day when Bavarian troops under General Knoissl captured the Russian positions near Orzechowce. There was actually a terrific bombardment of the entire north and northwest sector of Przemysl and an enormous German infantry push, but the Russians held on to most of their ground. That night, the invaders managed to even come within 100 meters, but were pushed back the following afternoon with heavy losses. And still the bombardment continued. Von Mackensen battering the western forts, Böhme-Moly to his right, trying to force the southern corner and reach the Lemberg Railway. Von Marwitz on his right, struggling through the marshes, and the Bavarians pounding away from the north. By nightfall the 31st, the Russians could no longer present a unified front. There were 2 breaches in the outer ring of forts. On June 2nd, a warm summer's day, invaders advanced from all sides, capturing the outer forts throughout the day and reaching the inner circle after nightfall. Here's a quote from the story of the Great War about what happened the morning of June 3rd. Quote, "Again the sun smiles over Galicia and sees the same iron belt of machine-like men still nearer the fortress. But the haggard defenders, where are they? Gone, flown, they have vanished during the night. Austrians and Bavarians march into the town. The only enemies they meet are the dead. Przemysl has fallen again before 20 times as powerful a blow as that which struck it down 72 days earlier." End quote. But Russia's situation was dire not just because of Przemysl. When the Austrians entered Stry at the end of May, their total gains on the Carpathian front for that month were 153,000 prisoners and 300 big guns. And Russia was now fighting on her own territory in Europe, at risk for the first time since Napoleon. Przemysl wasn't the only place that had suffered repeated assaults in the war, though. And this week, further south at Gallipoli on June 4th, over 30,000 Anglo-French...
We didn't get much talk on Gallipoli in the previous week episode. Wonder why.
Forces tried...
There's nothing really. Well, no, there was a truce signed where they buried their dead.
For the 3rd time to take Achi-Baba. Now, the Turks had cleverly built a dummy trench at one point, and the British dutifully bombarded it, and then troops advanced to find that the real trench further beyond it was fully manned and fully functional. But the Allies prevailed and took that trench too, with heavy losses, even capturing 6 Turkish machine guns. Then they were shelled by both sides, since the British artillery had finally cottoned on to the dummy trench and began bombarding the trench that the Allies had just taken. So they abandoned their guns to escape and made it back to their own original lines, with most of the officers killed. Also that day, just opposite the village of Krithia, the Allied advance was successful, and the Turks were driven back nearly all the way to the village. The British actually had an opportunity then for a possible breakthrough, but General Aylmer Hunter Weston did not send in his reserves, instead deploying them on part of the line where the French had failed to push back the Turks. And the men who had nearly reached Krithia were forced to retreat nearly to their starting points. Peter Hart says, it was on June 5th that it became apparent that the Allies were no longer directing the course of the Third Battle of Krithia. The Turks were fully in control. The Turkish counterattacks were indeed impressive and at times threatened to break through, but the Allies managed to hold the lines, and there the Second Battle of Krithia ended, with some 6,500 British and French casualties and close to 10,000 Turkish. The main result, though, was that the trenches were made deeper and stronger, and there the British and French sat, their every move being watched by Turkish artillery spotters high above on Achi Baba. Peter Hart believes that by now, General Sir Ian Hamilton and Hunter Weston had lost sight of what the true objective was, to seize
I'd agree with that statement.
the Kilid Bar Plateau that overlooked the Narrows themselves. Instead, they were fixated on Achi Baba, which did have tactical significance at Helles since it dominated the skyline and gave excellent panoramic views, but it didn't overlook the Narrows where the ships would have to go. In addition, the ground between Achi Baba and Kilid Bar was perfect for defense, so even taking the former would not help with taking the latter. You know what the main difference between the Third Battle of Krithia and the second one last month was? The Turks had beefed up their defenses. They had better tactical positions the whole time and better logistics, and they could bring up reserves wherever they needed. Numerically, the two sides were about even, and as we've seen on every other front of the war, in trench warfare, defense is king, and equal numbers of attackers never lead to success. I think the words I've been looking for to describe Hamilton and Hunter Weston's belief that this assault might actually
Is he about to diss him?
succeed are sheer madness. There you have it. Now,
I thought he was just going to plain out call them idiots.
how many more battles of Krithia do you think there'll be? Maybe we should have a contest. Write in the comment section below. There were other successes on other campaigns all over the world this week, though, in spite of the stalemate on the Western Front and Gallipoli. On the newest front, the Italians occupied Valona. In the Middle East, the British defeated the Ottoman forces at Korna and then followed them up the Tigris River, capturing Amara on June 3rd. Now, this was actually really spectacular. Charles Townshend and a force of 100 sailors and soldiers convinced the Amara garrison of 2,000 men to surrender. See, the garrison believed that a larger British force was just about to arrive. Townshend kept up the bluff for a whole day until his main forces could finally get there. In Cameroon, Anglo-French forces took Nyok May 29th, and the following day, the British took Sphinx Haven on Lake Nyassa. Also this week, San Marino declared war on Austria-Hungary June 3rd.
Good job, San Marino.
There are
Participation.
some other fairly important notes I'd like to mention this week before I go. The first successful Zeppelin bombing raid on London came May 31st. It killed 7 and injured 35. And on June 1st, 1 million French conscripts who were to be sent to the front lines were diverted to munitions factories instead. That same day, women were first hired in Great Britain as munitions workers. As we've seen, the need for artillery shells had reached the point of desperation. Also in June, 10 American submarines came to Britain for the British war effort. They were made in Pennsylvania and then smuggled across the border to Canada to avoid breaching American neutrality laws. And that was the week of a real world war. We saw action all over Africa. The British triumph in Mesopotamia, but fail at Gallipoli with their allies. The British capital itself was bombed. The Italians were on the move, and on the Eastern Front, the Russians were losing men by the hundreds of thousands. And still the war grows, larger and larger, continent by continent. It's hard to imagine, from our perspective, joining the war and believing you were going to take new territory without paying a horrific price in manpower. But still, nations did. Italy, San Marino in the past 10 days or so. And what of the news reports? When you read that Przemysl had fallen again and hundreds of thousands of men were dead, wounded, or captured, how could you think that this would not befall you? That your land, your men, would miraculously not be the ones who were destroyed. Their families would not be ripped apart. Their sons and fathers would come home. It was insanity to believe that you were any different. It was modern war. If you'd like to see how Przemysl fell for the...
Okay. This was another one. This was one of those episodes that I was talking about at the beginning here, where things are happening, but they're not really... Nothing decisive is happening. Nothing big really is happening. Like the recapture of Przemysl, it's okay, but it's not as important as it was the first when when Przemysl was under siege and then captured by the Russians. That was a big deal. This recapture just not as important because the Russians are giving it up. They're fleeing. They're not going to suffer as many casualties as Austro-Hungarians did in defending it and trying to break the siege, right? So, and Gallipoli is still happening. It's not a complete and total failure yet. They haven't been repelled. They're still there. So that's still a thing going on. Nothing happened on the Western Front. The Middle East is things are happening, but nothing big or decisive there still as well. Oh, yeah. This was one of the weaker episodes. Just having to have their week by week stuff. What happens in war? Some weeks are more filled than others. But yeah, that was artillery in World War I, the key to success. The Great War, week 45. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.